Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She stood there, arms folded, a half-smirk dancing on her lips like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I'm free to do whatever I want. That sentence didn't hit like a breakup line. It hit like a dare. It didn't come after a fight or during a moment of tension. No, she said it while we were out to dinner with two of her friends, people I barely knew. The waiter had just walked away, and conversation had dipped into relationships. One of them joked about freedom and rules, and that's when Emily turned to me with that look. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. Like she wanted it to sting. And it did. But not in the way she thought. It wasn't the words, it was the performance. I sat there, silent. I didn't challenge her. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded, took a sip of water, and let the fire start quietly inside me. That was the moment I stopped being in the relationship. I didn't walk out that night. That would have been too loud, too reactive. That's not the shadow. What I did instead was nothing. At least nothing visible. But inside, I was done. I had just witnessed the beginning of her unraveling. She thought she was declaring independence. What she didn't realize was, I had just granted it. She thought freedom meant no accountability, no consequences, no loyalty. I'd make sure it meant no me. The drive home was quiet. She scrolled on her phone. I drove in silence. But I wasn't numb. I was calculating, measuring time, recalling details. I started cataloging everything she'd said over the past few months that now made more sense. The late texts, the subtle changes in mood, the growing distance in bed. It all snapped into place, like a lock clicking shut. She had already left me emotionally. I was just the last one to notice. But now I was ahead. And when you're ahead, you don't scream. You don't beg. You prepare. I started thinking in moves. What I'd keep. What I'd take. What access I'd close. Who would know? When I'd disappear. This wouldn't be a break. It would be a vanishing act. Quiet, surgical, complete. Because the shadow doesn't yell. He listens. He watches. And then he exits. Not for revenge. For peace. She said she was free to do whatever she wanted. I made sure I wasn't part of any of it. The strange thing is, once you stop trying to hold something together, you see how broken it already was. That night, after her little declaration at dinner, I didn't confront Emily. I didn't ask her to explain. I just observed. And the next morning, I began to disappear in plain sight. She still texted me throughout the day, but I stopped responding immediately. I used to answer within minutes. Now I waited hours. I didn't ghost her. That's emotional. I became ambient noise. Present, but distant. 2 days later, I cleared a drawer. 3 days in, I turned off location sharing on my phone. Not with fanfare. Just one swipe. Gone. She noticed, of course. She asked, "Did your location glitch?" I said, "Probably." Then I went back to reading. I didn't look up. By the end of that week, I was sleeping with one eye open. Not because of fear, because I was studying her patterns. Shadow X doesn't rush. He calculates. I wanted to see how long she could pretend nothing was wrong. It turns out, she was good at it. Too good. We'd sit on the couch, the TV playing something neither of us cared about, and she'd casually scroll her phone. She'd laugh at things she wouldn't show me. Smile at messages she kept hidden. She thought I was too distracted to notice the micro changes. How she always tilted the screen away, how she started locking her phone more often. But I was watching. One night, while she was asleep, I got up and stood at the bedroom door. I just stared at her. And in that moment, I knew I didn't love her anymore. Not in the way that mattered. Not in the way that fought for survival. What I felt was colder. It wasn't hate. It was clarity. She had become a stranger wearing a familiar face. I started spending more time away. Gym sessions stretched longer. I picked up old hobbies, made excuses to work late. Every time I left the apartment, I took a little more of myself with me. A hoodie, a backup drive, an old photo album. She didn't notice. That's what confirmed it for me. If someone doesn't notice when you're half gone, they don't deserve to know when you disappear completely. I wasn't just exiting the relationship. I was deleting myself from her version of reality. Shadow doesn't slam doors. He makes it look like they were never open. I never asked questions. I just opened my eyes. Emily had always been guarded with her phone, but now there was a rhythm to it. A constant tension in her fingertips when she typed. Laughter that didn't belong to our world. Notifications that made her smile and then vanish into guilt. And silence. The kind that only comes when someone is deeply entertained by a secret they don't plan to share. So I tested something. One Saturday morning, I left my phone on the kitchen counter, screen unlocked. "Going for a run," I said. I didn't run. I stood by the door out of sight. She didn't even hesitate. As soon as I left, I heard her pick up my phone. I smiled. That same day, I bought a second phone. A burner. Not for spying. For preparing. By Sunday, I logged into our shared tablet. She rarely used it. That was her mistake. iCloud was still linked. Everything, messages, backups, browser history, fed into one place. And it was all there. Every photo he sent. Every conversation she thought she'd deleted. Even voice notes. One where she told him I was boring but dependable. Another where she laughed and said, "He'll never leave. He's too used to me." I didn't flinch. This wasn't about rage. Rage is noisy. I was past that. Instead, I created folders. One labeled October. Another labeled Lies. I downloaded screenshots, exported chats, saved call logs. Then I turned on a private server. The data wasn't for revenge. It was for control. She'd never see it coming. A few days later, she asked if I was okay. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I've never been better." She smiled, relieved. And in that smile, I saw a woman who truly believed she hadn't lost anything. That was her second mistake. She thought I didn't know. She thought she had time. What she didn't realize was, I had already started packing her future without me. Every night, after she fell asleep, I would upload one new backup. Then I'd delete it from the local drive. Clean, surgical. One morning, I changed all my passwords. Then I changed the locks. She didn't notice either. But the final nail wasn't digital. It was emotional. I stopped listening. Not outwardly. I still nodded, made eye contact, even laughed on cue. But inside, the connection was severed. I was present in body only. I became a shadow in our own home. And I began preparing for something she wouldn't understand until it was too late. Total removal. No confrontation. Just absence. And that would hit harder than any truth ever could. I wasn't staying to punish her. I was staying to erase myself strategically. You don't just vanish. You remove your fingerprints first. You scrub your name from the walls before they realize you're no longer home. So I stopped correcting her lies. Every time she said she was staying late at work, I nodded. I even offered to pick her up once, knowing she'd say no. She gave some excuse about back-to-back meetings, and I smiled and said, "Of course." She didn't catch the silence behind my eyes. I moved my finances into a new account. Quietly. I didn't even close the joint account. We both knew she rarely checked it. But I rerouted my paycheck, canceled auto transfers, and changed my online banking alerts. The only message I left in that account was the dwindling balance. She thought the bills paid themselves. That month, I backed out of the lease renewal. I told the landlord not to say anything. I offered to cover the last 3 months myself. No questions asked. Just silence, as always. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed, then on the couch. I made up excuses, late call, back pain, didn't want to wake you. She pretended to believe me, but her body language screamed discomfort. She didn't want to ask why, because she already knew. That was her third mistake. Emily was counting on my passivity, on my history of forgiveness, on the quiet man who'd rather solve problems than walk away from them. What she forgot is that every quiet man has a final line. And once crossed, we never looked back. I started working out more. Not for revenge, but for clarity. Every rep felt like shedding a layer of the man who tolerated her. I stopped drinking, cut sugar, cleaned up my sleep. I became sharper, faster, harder to read. That made her nervous. She started hovering. "Where were you? Why didn't you call? Are you okay?" I gave her the same line every time. Just busy. Always with a half smile. The more I became unavailable, the more she tried to re-engage. She started cooking again, buying new lingerie, suggesting weekend getaways. It was almost laughable. She thought intimacy could erase betrayal, that a candlelight dinner could overwrite the texts I read at 3 a.m., that some half-hearted affection could realign a man who had already stepped out of her timeline. But I wasn't rejecting her. I was outgrowing her. Not emotionally. Strategically. I let her lean closer, just so she'd fall harder when I stepped back. And she would. Because women like Emily don't notice the storm until the room is already flooded. And by then, I planned to be somewhere else, dry, untouched, and gone. The day she lost me forever didn't come with screaming, broken dishes, or teary ultimatums. It came with breakfast. I made her coffee. Her usual. 2 sugars, oat milk, cinnamon dusted on top. I placed it on the table in front of her, kissed her forehead, and said I was heading out for the day. She smiled, completely unaware. She didn't know it was the last cup I'd ever make her. I wasn't leaving yet, but that morning marked the shift. I started behaving like a ghost who hadn't left the house yet. Present, but fading. Every gesture I made from then on was part of a silent farewell. That week, I visited a realtor. I told him I needed something minimal, quiet, and fast. No delays. 1 bedroom, high floor, east-facing. I signed the papers without blinking. Paid 3 months up front. Keys would be ready in 10 days. I said, perfect. Back home, I moved everything that mattered, documents, old journals, passwords, valuables, into a storage unit under a different name. I kept our shared spaces untouched, let her believe everything was as she left it. She started relaxing again. It's insane how much a lie can comfort someone. The same night I secured the new apartment, she posted a story. Champagne, laughter, candlelight. She captioned it Girls' Night, no boys, no rules. I didn't react. I just downloaded the video and saved it in a folder named Final Notes. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was done. And the moment a man is truly done, not emotionally, strategically, it's already over. Her actions no longer needed interpretation. They were data, movements, patterns, and I had already learned everything I needed to know. 3 days later, she asked if I wanted to go on a weekend retreat together. I said yes, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because I wanted her to believe, for just a moment longer, that the floor beneath her wasn't already crumbling. She wore my hoodie that day, took selfies, posted us on her feed with some fake nostalgic caption. Her followers sent hearts. Her mother commented, "My favorite couple." I screenshotted everything. I wasn't building a case. I was collecting echoes. So that later, when she sat alone trying to piece it all together, she'd have artifacts, but no answers. Because I wouldn't give her one. My voice would vanish from her world completely. She would only hear silence, and her own echoes bouncing back. And that silence would crush her louder than any goodbye. I didn't vanish in the middle of the night. That would have been too theatrical, too obvious. Instead, I walked out the front door at 6:12 a.m. on a Thursday. She was still asleep, curled up in the same blanket she used to wrap around me. I paused at the doorway, not because I had doubts, just to look at the place one last time like a crime scene finally solved. The apartment smelled like lavender detergent and old memories. Everything she touched still looked the same, but I didn't feel anything. No rage, no grief, just the precision of a man executing his final move. I left nothing behind. No notes, no explanation, no goodbye texts. I took my keys. I took my silence. And I took back every ounce of power I ever surrendered. By 7:30 a.m., I had handed in my company laptop, cleared out my work desk, and left a resignation email that didn't include her name or reference. Not because she worked with me, she didn't, but because I associated that job with the version of me who tolerated her. I erased that man. New job offers were already in motion. Remote, independent, unattached. I wasn't just leaving her. I was leaving the environment she infected. By noon, I had installed new locks on the door of my new apartment. No forwarding address. No shared utilities. No linked calendars. The Spotify account? Logged out. Netflix? Gone. Shared delivery services? Canceled. I scrubbed myself from her digital map with the discipline of a surgeon. She didn't notice anything yet. That evening, she texted, "What do you want for dinner?" I didn't respond. She followed up with a voice note. Fake sweet, laced with performative affection. I archived it. At 10:24 p.m., she called. Once. Then again. Then 7 more times. I didn't block her. I just let the phone ring. Because real silence isn't muting someone. It's letting them scream into the void and realizing no one's listening. By midnight, I had 19 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and a single text that read, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. Not then. Not the next day. Not ever. The next morning, I got a call from our landlord. She was hysterical, asking if I'd been kidnapped or hospitalized. He said I'd already vacated and paid out the lease. Legally, I was no longer a tenant. She had 14 days to find alternate housing. He told me her voice cracked when she said, he wouldn't just leave like that. But I had. And that was her 4th mistake. believing the quiet man would always wait, always explain, always forgive. She forgot that when a man like me walks out in silence, it's not an escape. It's a declaration. She just didn't speak the language. The thing about silence, it doesn't echo right away. At first, it confuses. Then it offends. Then it terrifies. That's the sequence. I knew it would happen. And I waited, not with anticipation, but with certainty. Like someone watching a storm they saw coming from miles away finally crash into shore. By the third day, her texts changed tone. Less concerned, more hostile. Accusations without punctuation. This is childish. What are you trying to prove? You think this makes you strong? I read each one, then deleted them. She still didn't get it. Strength isn't in the reaction. It's in the refusal to react. Meanwhile, her world began shrinking. She called friends. Some answered, some didn't. A few messaged me, trying to mediate. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in explanations or bridges. I was interested in detachment. Her sister called me. Said she was crying, confused. You owe her at least a conversation, she said. I said nothing. Because I didn't owe her a post-mortem. This wasn't a break. It was an end. She posted a photo the next day, an old one of us on vacation. Captioned it with some vague quote about time and healing. I wasn't tagged, but I saw it. Everyone did. The likes came slower than usual. One of her friends commented, "Are you guys okay?" She didn't reply. The silence she had once wielded so freely now wrapped itself around her like a rope. Each unanswered message from me became a reflection. Each ignored call, a reminder that control had shifted. She tried a new tactic, a carefully curated message about closure, healing, and finding peace. But peace had nothing to do with it. I hadn't left to find peace. I left because the version of me who stayed had died, and I wasn't burying him in her backyard. At this point, she still hadn't cried in front of anyone. Not publicly, but I knew the moment was coming. Not because I wanted it, but because her need for validation ran deeper than her remorse. She needed someone to see her loss to believe it was real. But the thing about public personas, they don't mourn well. A friend texted me. She says you ghosted her. Left her with no warning. I didn't correct it. Let them believe what they needed to. Because in this story, I didn't need to be the villain or the hero. I just needed to be gone. And the more she tried to summon me back into the narrative, the louder her silence became. But I wasn't listening. I had already learned the most powerful sound in a broken relationship is the one you don't make. 2 weeks after I disappeared, she found my new address. I wasn't surprised. People like her don't accept absence. They treat it like an invitation to dig deeper. She showed up outside my building, dressed like she used to when she wanted something. Not casual, calculated. I saw her through the camera at the front door. She rang twice. Waited. Then rang again. I didn't buzz her in. 5 minutes later, my phone lit up. She was calling. I let it ring until it died. Then silence. Then another call. I ignored that one too. Eventually, she left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling, not with sadness, but with confusion wrapped in desperation. You don't get to just walk away like that. She was wrong. I did. And I had. Later that day, she emailed. A long message filled with curated vulnerability. I've been thinking about everything, she wrote. Maybe we rushed into silence. Can we just talk? No, we couldn't. Because I wasn't holding a grudge. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I had simply removed myself from a system that kept bleeding me. When I didn't respond to the email, she tried something else. She called my mother. Told her I'd vanished. Told her she was worried. My mother, always polite but not naive, told her, if he's not talking to you, it's because he doesn't want to. That shook her. She called again, this time crying. Left a message. Please don't leave me like this. I don't understand. But she did. She just didn't want to. Because understanding meant acknowledging her role. And that's the one thing she never learned to do. Take ownership when there was no audience to clap for her recovery. By week 3, she stopped trying to reach me directly. But she didn't stop performing. A photo appeared on her social media, her in a coffee shop, smiling with a mutual friend. The caption, "Healing comes in waves." The irony was laughable. You can't heal from a loss you refuse to admit was your fault. She tried one last thing. She waited outside my office building, the one I no longer worked in. Texted me a photo of herself standing there with the words, "I'm here if you want to talk." I looked at it, then deleted it. There was nothing left to discuss. Because a woman who tells you, you're just convenient, doesn't get to ask for closure. She doesn't get to knock after she locked you out for years emotionally. She doesn't get a final chapter. She gets silence. That was the plan from the start. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just complete erasure. Quiet. Sharp. Surgical. The kind of ending that doesn't need punctuation, because it was already over long before she noticed the door was closed. By the fourth week, her posts dried up. No more coffee shop selfies. No more healing captions. She went silent online, and that's when I knew she wasn't healing. She was unraveling. Not because she lost me, but because she lost control of the narrative. Emily didn't love me. She loved the version of me that orbited her needs. The dependable backup plan. The man who wouldn't leave, no matter how disposable she made him feel. The convenience. But when you remove convenience, what's left? Reality. Word started getting around. Our mutual friends, the ones she leaned on to build her image, stopped answering her calls. I didn't say a word to them. I didn't have to. Truth has a strange way of showing up when you least expect it, and her collapse was loud. One of them, Marcus, reached out to me. He said, "I don't know what happened between you two, but I saw her last week. She's not doing great." I said nothing. I didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. People were finally seeing the cracks I'd lived with for years. The manipulation masked as charm. The indifference cloaked in charisma. Without me there to absorb her chaos, she had to sit in it alone. And it showed. She stopped showing up to work on time. Missed deadlines. Started clashing with her boss. Her carefully curated world was decaying, not because I exposed her, but because I removed the glue that held it together. My silence, my compliance. Shadow doesn't destroy. He withdraws and watches what can't stand on its own fall apart. One evening, I got a message from her sister. "We're all worried about Emily. Can you at least talk to her?" I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. She had people. She just didn't know how to be honest with them without me there as her emotional alibi. She used me as the reason she didn't open up to others. Now, with me gone, she had no one to hide behind. The final shift came quietly. I heard she'd taken time off work. Some called it a break. Others whispered the word breakdown. But I wasn't celebrating. This wasn't victory. It was just distance. The necessary void. And in that void, I thrived. I started traveling again. Something she always said was too expensive. I reconnected with friends she didn't like. Picked up freelance projects. Changed my wardrobe. Not dramatically, but purposefully. The man she once said was just convenient had become a ghost she couldn't haunt. I didn't need to post about it. I didn't need to prove anything. My life had moved on while hers hit pause. And the worst part for her? I wasn't angry. I was indifferent. Because when a man stops needing to be understood, that's when you know he's free. I saw her one last time. Not by design. Not by hope. Just circumstance. It was at a bookstore downtown. Ironic, given how many quiet Sundays we used to spend just like that, thumbing through pages, pretending time didn't matter. But this time, she wasn't browsing. She was frozen near the entrance, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn away. I simply looked through her, like a stranger walking past another in a city too big for memory. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. That moment, it said everything. She looked different. Not in appearance, but in posture. The weight she used to put on me, the energy she drained, it was now showing up on her own shoulders. Her eyes held the kind of desperation people mistake for regret. But I knew better. Regret isn't about missing someone. It's about losing control. She'd lost both. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the one I moved into after I vanished. No photos on the walls. No traces of the life I'd left behind. Just peace, quiet, and space that felt mine. My phone buzzed. A number I knew. I didn't answer. She texted once. "Can we talk?" I read it. And then, without emotion, I deleted it. Because when a man has seen the truth, not the performance, not the illusion, but the raw, unfiltered reality of who someone really is, no conversation is necessary. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was simply done. I changed the locks months ago, canceled the shared cards, moved my accounts, packed what mattered and left behind what didn't. Not in a fury, but in full control. There was no speech, no confrontation, only a decision, and the execution of that decision with the precision of someone who'd learned the cost of staying. I didn't need closure. I was the closure. They say the loudest goodbye is silence. That's true. But there's something even louder than that. Absence. The kind of absence that doesn't beg to be noticed, but can't be ignored. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And maybe that's the part that'll haunt her most. Not the betrayal, not the fall, not the silence, but the fact that I never looked back. While she kept refreshing her messages, hoping the man she used to control would break his own rules and give her one last word. I was already writing a new chapter. Alone, free, and finally home. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.